Pashinyan is worthy of the Order of Merit for the fatherland. He deserved it. But don't be too quick to twiddle your thumb at the temple, we're not crazy. A slender theory has emerged and we will share that thought with you. So, let's start with a question like this. Do you know what the most significant cause of hostility between neighboring countries is? These are disputed territories. For example, under the Soviet Union, there were frequent shootouts between us and the Chinese on the border. Their citizens on their side of the border could insult our border guards with various nuisances like showing their bare ass. This was precisely because there were numerous disputed territories between the Soviet Union and China, the most famous of which was Damansky Island, which everyone has heard of. It was only when Putin resolved all disputed territorial issues, for which he was repeatedly scolded by schizopatriots in the opposition, that a truly new era of cooperation and sincere friendship with China began. Some will ask, what does China have to do with this? The fact is that the stumbling block in establishing closer cooperation with Azerbaijan after the collapse of the Soviet Union was the disputed territory. Armenia with Azerbaijan, Nagorno-Karabakh. As you know, we have stood for the Armenians since the dawn of time and saved their people from annihilation. Therefore, after the First Karabakh War took place in Armenia, having defeated Azerbaijan, gained control over Nagorno-Karabakh and the family of regions around it, this circumstance became a stumbling block for the development of our close cooperation with Azerbaijan. After all, we were forced, as we had been in previous centuries, to side with the Armenians, no matter how wrong they were. And during the Second Karabakh War, which was started by Azerbaijan, having accumulated strength and tired of suffering humiliation from Pashinyan dancing in Shushi and saying that Ortsak is Armenia, we literally saved the 30,000-strong Armenian group in Nagorno-Karabakh from annihilation. We do not know what it cost Vladimir Putin to persuade Ilham Aliyev to agree to a cessation of hostilities and what damage this agreement did to Ilham Aliyev in the eyes of Azerbaijani ultra-patriots. He practically won this war and could have triumphantly liberated not only the 7 occupied districts in Shusha, but also the entire territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. However, he went for an unfavorable peace and even agreed that the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh's status was postponed for the time being. It should be reminded that the Organization of the Collective Security Treaty from the CST was established in 1992 in Tashkent, and Azerbaijan also joined it, having signed the treaty on September 24, 1993. However, in 1999, he declined to renew it. This was probably done by Gidar Aliyev precisely because of the fact that the same organization included Armenia, which seized the territory of Azerbaijan and was under the protection of Russia. And in 2020, after the war actually lost by Armenians, a peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia was concluded with Putin's mediation, after which Nagorno-Karabakh remained a disputed territory and a stumbling block in relations between Russia and Azerbaijan. And the solution to this issue was completely beyond our control. Why? Because Putin could not persuade either the president of Azerbaijan or the prime minister of Armenia to give up Nagorno-Karabakh. And the question of its ownership was soon to be back on the agenda and giving us headaches. Because we would once again have to throw ourselves between two fires, between countries friendly to Russia, trying to find a way out of a stalemate. Whatever proposals we made to either, they would always be met with bayoneting, either by one side, the other, or both. The situation was stalemate. It could mar our relations with Azerbaijan and Turkey, which respectively have been supporting their sister country for years and decades, and it would have been impossible for us to resolve it peacefully. All in all, we didn't have a good solution to this issue. No nation would agree to concessions, and we would not pressurize. That's what our president has always talked about. For example, the Moscow Kremlin-Putin program shows moments of his speech on this topic. And here, as they say, Pashinyan entered the arena all in white. He decided to play the game of independence and multi-vectorism and went to Prague without consulting Putin, where he held 3 rounds of talks with Ilham Aliyev with the mediation of Emmanuel Macron and Charles Michel. They then signed a statement that Azerbaijan and Armenia mutually recognize each other's territorial integrity. That is, it recognized Nagorno-Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan. How Emmanuel and Charles managed to convince Poroshenko to go for it, I don't know. They probably promised lacy panties. But from that second, the agreement signed by Azerbaijan and Armenia through Russian mediation became null and void. Russian peacekeepers found themselves on the sovereign territory of Azerbaijan on birds' rights, and the fate of Nagorno-Karabakh was predetermined. It was no longer a disputed territory. It was no longer a stumbling block between Russia and Azerbaijan. After that, Azerbaijan started to act on its sovereign territory as it should. He decided to clean up the place, blocked the Lachin corridor, through which arms and ammunition were secretly delivered to Nagorno-Karabakh. And recently they decided to impose constitutional order to disarm the illegal armed groups there. European partners have deceived Pashinyan, that's unequivocal. That is why now, in order to deflect the anger of Armenians from himself, he is trying to turn the tables and blame all his guilt on Russia. I would like to remind Armenians that they themselves brought a pro-Western politician to power. Twice. He tried to tear Armenia away from Russia, but so far he has only torn Nagorno-Karabakh away from Armenia. At the same time, he did us a huge favor, cut the Gordiev knot in the relations between Russia and Azerbaijan. That's what Pashinyan should be awarded an order for there is no longer any obstacle to the closest cooperation with Azerbaijan. But Pashinyan apparently did not realize from the first time that if he was deceived once, he will be deceived again. He is going to slam the door on withdrawing from the CSTO, which will completely remove Russia's responsibility to support and protect Armenia for centuries. Let him come out. Azerbaijan will return to the CSTO, not as an eternal disgruntled beggar, but as an equal partner, which will be of real benefit, rather than eternal complaints, eternal discontent and eternal begging. If he pulls off this stunt, then definitely Pashinyan should be given an order. Well, Armenia has more to come out of it to mess with Russia, CIS and EAEU, so Pashinyan has every chance to become a full cavalier of this order. It would be a very interesting move if Armenia and Azerbaijan were to join the EAEU. Azerbaijan's PPP GDP is $181 billion, Armenia's PPP GDP is only $43 billion. Although now these countries have no territorial disputes, so it is possible that there may not be a reshuffle, but a replenishment, if of course the Armenians bring Pashinyan to his senses or bring another Pashinyan to power. This, dear fellow citizens, is what riots, illegal changes of power and the rise to power of pro-Western politicians lead to. Armenians, as always, wanted to defeat corruption, but brought to power a pro-Western politician who was not too smart, and as a result they lost forever the territories they had considered their own since ancient times. The main thing now is not to lose themselves, because if Pashinyan succeeds and Russia leaves, then next to Armenia there is such a country as Turkey, and Turks, Armenians, as you know, love Armenians so much that they can't sleep. And if something happens, Russia will not come to the rescue, but the US will express strong concern and maybe even criticize Turkey a little. Some people will wonder if Pashinyan withdraws Armenia from the CSTO, then Armenia may join NATO, which is a danger for us. Some will also say we are overly optimistic. For those who have not yet understood, let me explain once again that our optimism refers to the fact that Pashinyan, by recognizing Azerbaijan's sovereignty over Karabakh, has removed a very serious, or to be more precise, unsolvable problem from Russia. We do not take this lightly, and of course NATO's expansion in this region and the closure of our base will be painful for us. We will talk about this further on. But the feeling when you read such expert opinions on this topic is as if we had some other options and as if we were guilty of something again. First, we do not interfere in the internal affairs of our neighbors and by definition could not prevent him from coming to power, because Sarkisyan did not ask Putin for help, as Lukashenko did, nor did he ask for troops in the DKB, as Tokayev did. Second, whether Armenia joins NATO or not depends little on us, no matter how much we swear in the comments. If it is their will and NATO's will to accept them, we are powerless here. But our conscience is clear, because our guilt in the loss of Nagorno-Karabakh to Armenia does not exist, despite Pashinyan's accusations. All reasonable Armenians should realize this. Third, Armenia's accession to NATO would simply be an unpleasant geopolitical moment for us due to the historical closeness of our and Armenian people. For those who want to argue, we suggest to look at a map and compare the distance from Turkey to Moscow with the distance from Armenia to the same Moscow. I hope to clarify that it's no longer needed, it's clearly visible. So what is the point of NATO in Armenia, if the entire Baltic states and Finland, our neighboring countries, which are very close to our capital, are already in this organization? That is to say, there is no need to speak here about some additional very threatening factor in case of NATO membership in Armenia, especially since Armenia and Russia have no common border. But there are natural barriers, the main Caucasus Range, which in case of a hypothetical missile attack from that side will allow to easily detect launches and track the flight of any low-flying cruise missiles by installing radars on natural elevations. In general, I repeat, Armenia's accession to NATO is certainly unpleasant for us, but not fatal. It is rather a danger for Armenia itself. But we will talk about this further, but for now let us reflect on what could have happened if the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan in Nagorno-Karabakh had continued. In this dispute we would have to stand on the side of Armenians, offending Azerbaijanis. Let me remind you once again that Azerbaijan left the CSTO in 1999 and joined the Guam bloc. Although this bloc was not viable, it was hostile to Russia, because in addition to Azerbaijan there were 3 countries that had territorial disputes with Russia. They had a grudge against us and all wanted to join NATO, Georgia, the 404 countries in Moldova. Azerbaijan did not publicly declare such plans and did not antagonize Russia, probably because its president and father and son Aliyev maintained very friendly personal relations with Putin, realizing that he simply cannot but support Armenia and were smarter than the rulers of those 3 countries. However, in case of continuation of the conflict and exhaustion of the possibility to resolve it peacefully before Ilham Aliyev or the next president of Azerbaijan, who, by the way, could have been brought to power in this country through a color revolution. At the instigation and support of the United States, the protesters warmed by the fact that their president is timid and cannot solve the issue of the return of Nagorno-Karabakh. There would be a question. And what to do next? Who to go to for help? If Armenia is backed by the CSTO and Russia? And there would be only one answer to it, in NATO. Would that have been better? Would it be better for Russia if Azerbaijan, a country with a population of 10 million people, Armenia has about 3 million, turned into a country unfriendly to us, bordering us, and joined NATO, with territorial claims to a CSTO member and our ally? Oh, please. And no one has forgotten that last year we had grandiose plans to create a north-south transport corridor, one of the branches of which will pass through the territory of Azerbaijan. Here is what was written then in one of the newspapers, I quote, "Creation of a single operator on the north-south ITC will contribute to the development of the direction and removal of barriers." However, for Russia, work in the region is complicated by the Azerbaijani-Armenian conflict. According to analysts, the choice for Russia here is between the development of relations with Azerbaijan and Turkey or the risk of reducing export cargo traffic. So I repeat that Pashinyan, being a project of the West, brought to power by it, played into our hands by cutting the most complicated Gordiv knot in the form of a territorial problem between these countries. Here, as they say, woe to the losers, Armenians are shedding tears, but we will continue to increase economic cooperation with both Armenia and Azerbaijan, because we have no more obstacles in this regard. Pashinyan will now implement the second part of his plan to break Armenia away from Russia. It is time for Armenian citizens to act. Because it would be a disaster for them. Because Armenia is subsidized by Russia, as Dmitry Peskov reminded them. And if they let Pashinyan carry out this plan, then that's it. There will be no subsidies. And the US will give them nothing materially. Which means they'll be much poorer. In addition to that, let us remind you that in terms of security, their situation will worsen because they have Turkey right next to them, and that is an even greater danger to them than poverty. This is how the Turks are slowly taking over Adjara, a Georgian territory. Georgia's staunch friend and ally Turkey sincerely considers Georgian Adjara its territory and they do not see it as part of Georgia. To make this dream come true, Turkey led by Recep Erdogan has spared no effort and has already achieved a lot. It has been penetrating into Adjara all the years of Georgian independence, thoughtfully and comprehensively, on all fronts, political, economic, cultural and religious. That is, they are actively settling there, like Albanians in Kosovo, and if there is an interethnic conflict, Erdogan will not hesitate for a second to lead his army into Georgia, under the pretext of protecting Turkomans, as it happened in Syria, and will seize Adjara. Who will stand up for Georgia and start a war with Turkey? Probably Armenia, because there's no one else. Georgians, having forgotten who was their protector as well as the protector of Armenians, had quarreled with Russia for centuries. Georgia was not admitted to NATO, and NATO would not intervene in the event of an armed conflict between two of its members, as is the case with the clashes between Turkey and Greece. But Pashinyan is still in power, and he continues with the US plan. Today it has already been reported that Nicole wants to bill Russia for having a base in Gyumri. That's what they write, we're in no condition to be throwing land around. In the near future, we will send an invoice to the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs to pay for the deployment of troops in our country. That is, he is trying to force us to close the military base in Armenia. We can't and won't balk because, as stated above, our president does not interfere in the internal affairs of his neighbors and will not organize coups there. And we do not have numerous NGOs and NGOs there, as Americans do. Will the Armenians themselves be able to remove him from power? I'm not sure, because all color revolutions are usually carried out by the opposition, whose work is supported by Western NGOs and paid for through various funds by the US State Department. They even have a line item for democracy promotion, and the kind of monetary support that Pashinyan himself received for the coup from the protesters will not be there. But this is their last chance, because Nikolai Pashinyan continues to burn bridges.